In tonight's conversation with Alice, we will talk about her new book, In Praise of Veg, a book filled to the brim with recipes which pay tribute to the wonderful world of veg and plant-based cooking. Alice will talk and share tips about cooking and eating more veggies at home, and discuss why eating more plants is one way in which we can all take action on the climate crisis. And a reminder that Alice's book is available to purchase tonight, and Alice will stay around for a bit to sign some copies. So let me introduce you to Alice. Alice encourages people of all ages to find the joy in cooking and eating. And her new cookbook, which celebrates the wonderful world of veg and plant-based cooking, has already become a staple in many Australian kitchens and has been translated into several languages. Alice first became well known to Australians as the bubbly and brilliant cook in glasses in MasterChef quite a few years ago now. Since then, Alice has gone on to appear in many TV shows, co-hosting and speaking on radio-related food programs, as well as writing prolifically for many food-focused publications. In short, Alice has become a household name and the friend in food you've always wanted to find. Alice's new book, In Praise of Veg, is all about providing us with inspiration and support we need to eat more veggies in more wonderful ways at home. And as we know, this can only be good for us and the planet. Welcome, Alice. I'll now hand over tonight's panel moderator, Elizabeth Coyle from Yarra Libraries, and I hope you all enjoy tonight's conversation.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. And congratulations, Alice, on this incredible new book, In Praise of Veg. I brought a library copy, in case anyone hasn't seen the cover there. And there are many incredible chefs who have been really excited about your book coming out, including Nigella Lawson, who's actually written on your cover, which is incredible, A Force of Nature. And so my first question is, why do you think there's a growing interest in eating plant-based food and cooking?
Why do I think that there's a growing interest? There certainly is a growing interest. That is seen tonight by the many of you that have come out on a blustery Wednesday evening to hear me chinwag. But I think that social media has a lot to answer for in a good way, because it's meaning that a lot of people are hearing messages that might not necessarily have reached them because they might not have access to the information. And now they're coming together in hives, not out in hives, but in hives, in their hive minds, and sharing ideas and being inspired. And particularly the new generation of cooks, Gen Z, are so climate focused. They're so focused on what they themselves can do to affect positive action. So to them, they can see the direct correlation between what they eat, where they shop, who they support, and what impact that has on the community and on the environment too.
And so I also wanted to ask you, in your book, you talk about this idea of plant forage, the term. Can you go into that a bit for us and explain that?
I'm glad,
it's sort of an approach,
yes.
Isn't it?
Thank you, Eliza, for bringing that up nice and early. I myself am not fully plant-based. I would call myself 80% plant-based, 20%, garnishing with various kind of animal proteins and things. Butter, for example, schmaltz. I use the whole animal. I think about where I buy it. I'm always thinking about, I've got an app to tell me whether the fish that I'm purchasing is sustainable, all of those sorts of things. And when I wrote the book, I knew it would be disingenuous of me to write a fully plant-based book when I myself am not a fully plant-based eater. But what I have to say is, probably that's part of the reason why the book has been so successful, because there are so many people. In fact, no one that I've ever spoken to has ever said, oh, I'm not keen on eating more plants. Everybody wants to eat more vegetables. They just don't know where to start. And if I had written a vegan book, I think that would have cut out a lot of people who don't feel like they are included in that conversation. So being plant forward, being veg forward is a very inclusive way to think about eating more vegetables. And it's literally just changing the way that you think about your meal planning. So rather than thinking about vegetables last, rather than thinking meat and 3 veg, you might think 3 veg and meat. Or you might even think 5 veg and whoops, we didn't have any animal protein in that meal and it was still delicious. So it's just about changing your mindset and thinking, how can I make the vegetables that I have in my crisper really tasty, instead of perhaps also heading out and letting those vegetables in your crisper turn into food waste.
And so also starting with the vegetables and sort of building out, right? Because
Start with the veg.
I think you mentioned that in the book. You
Yes.
say, vegetable-centric.
Totally,
Yeah,
and I tried to pitch that. You'll love this. I tried to pitch that as my next book. Just call it Start with the Veg. Don't you think that's good? That's really good, right? But my publisher said that by the time that my next book comes out, which will be Christmas next year, all going well, my manuscript's in mid-October, so
Oh my goodness.
I know. I like to live dangerously. But they said that they don't think that that's going to be enough for people because by then it'll be so much more the way that we're thinking about vegetables anyway. So that's really exciting to me that shift is happening so quickly. And it's not just here in Australia. All over the world that shift is happening. In Praise of Veg just came out in Germany. Colours of Greens came out in March. It's already onto its first reprint.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And again, I feel like I'm the canary down the coal mine in a way because it's so, hefty. It so clearly outlines what this book is about. So it really is, to me, the harbinger of change. And I'm really excited about it.
I found the book really good as well because I love the colour coding. But in addition to the colour coding, if you have the book, you go through each vegetable and you give about 4 options about how to cook them. And even for me, it kind of helps me create with vegetable. Was this kind of an intention that you had?
So intentional. I'd like to think of the recipes as serving suggestions. I'm not a recipe follower. So why would I write an explicit instruction book about recipes that I'm not going to follow? I'd much rather give you inspiration through beautiful photography, through perhaps some recipes that I think work really well. But what you'll find in each recipe is here's how to make it quicker. Or here's what you can do with it on the other side of the year where that vegetable's not in season. So it's very much exactly the book that I would have wanted written for me. And that was very intentional. And it was because last time you saw me on stage, it was with Nigella Lawson in 2019. 2019.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, start of 2019. I was just about ready to pop.
Yeah.
And Nigella was speaking about how she writes her books, and she said that she writes her books for herself. And that was very inspiring to me. So if anyone out there in the audience is thinking about writing a cookbook, that's where you start. Don't write it for anybody else but you.
Okay. I also wanted to ask, because we've been talking about climate change a lot with the climate emergency in Yarra this year, and just looking at, I don't know if this is still, current, but there's a lot of associations we have with a meat-based diet. There's memories, there's associations of family dinners. Well, I know I relate to that. Friends, celebrations. So how do you think we can shift this kind of deeply ingrained connection to a meat-based diet? I mean, it's not across, I think this is definitely changing.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts about that?
I think it depends generationally speaking. So the older generation certainly, and particularly of certain cultures too, are very used to that roast dinner approach. And there's a level of status, I think, that's come through that is a little bit archaic. Hundreds of years ago, if you ate meat, then you were seen as somebody with a high status. But there is so much access now to animal proteins that actually it's not an indicator of any kind of level of status. And indeed, what we're seeing, if you look at Hollywood, is that a lot of celebrities are turning plant-based. And then, so on the flip side of that association, I think that there's also the association that turning your diet plant-based is expensive. So for some people, that seems like a bit of a barrier as well. So what you're asking is, how do we remove the barriers for each person? And people have different drivers. And the last thing that you want to say is stop eating meat or don't eat animal proteins, because as soon as you tell someone not to do something, that's like...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's why you say if you eat more veg, what will tend to happen is you're just naturally eating less of the other stuff. And if you look at the cookbooks that are really popular now, people like Ottolenghi, that share plate model really suits a vegetable-heavy diet.
Yes.
Lots of salads, lots of whole roasted cauliflowers, lots of colour on the table as well, eating the rainbow, pushing that. If you think about animal proteins, most of it's pretty brown, pretty white, it's pretty boring. So how can we make the vibrancy of vegetables a real feature of every meal?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think books like yours are really helping make that shift as well. Like, I know that I grew up with my grandparents for quite a long time, and they were definitely meat and 3 veg. And so half of the transition was saying, oh, okay, so how do we have just not 3 pieces, of vegetables and take out the meat? We need something more sophisticated and more
like a
delicious.
bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think books like this help us make that bridge as well.
Thank you. I'm so glad, because I think one thing that I was really worried about, that kept me up at night, is, am I allowed to do this? Are people going to buy this book and be disappointed because they might be thinking this is going to be a fully plant-based book, or they might be thinking, oh, I wanted more meat in this book. And what I realised is that I've offered enough kind of options, substitutions. If you want to take this fully vegan, this is what you can do, etc., etc. Note as well, so when you're trying to change somebody's mind, research has shown that there's certain language that works much better than other language. So I don't tend to say that my recipe for this is vegan, or I don't tend to speak about veganism at all, because that has been shown to be a real for people that are not there. So thinking plant-based, plant-forward, plant-friendly is really, really great. So if anyone out there in the audience are creating plant-based products and have vegan on your label, get rid of it.
Thank you. Okay, so we might just pause my questions for a minute and give everybody a chance to ask Alice a couple of questions. So we'll have a 15-minute moment to ask all your questions. I'm sure you have heaps. To help us get around to everybody, if you could raise your hand if you have a question, and gorgeous Sam and Kelly will come around and bring the microphone to you so that Alice can hear you.
And can I just say that this is very unusual. This is the first time that I've done stage work in the time of...
I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, last year, everything that I did was online.
Yeah, of course.
It was fantastic because it meant that I could connect with people from all around the world, and it felt like my stage got even bigger. But wow, I've missed this. I have missed this so much, to be able to look out into people's eyes and see faces and smiles. It's quite emotional, actually. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what questions you have for me, if any.
Oh, thanks. I was wondering what you'd suggest for Christmas dinner, which is traditionally meat-based.
A very, very good question. It's always someone in the back that has the first question. Thank you for being the canary down the coal mine in this conversation. Christmas dinner, that takes me back really nicely to my segments on News Breakfast, because what I tend to do on those segments is think about plant-based eating, because that makes it more inclusive. So one thing that I suggested on News Breakfast for Christmas time is that whole roasted cauliflower. So think about big vegetables that can whole roast, as you might imagine a turkey or a leg of... So ham leg, I would not recommend doing my watermelon ham. That is not good. It takes you 3 days and it doesn't taste very nice. So just ignore that trend. It's terrible. Even if it does seem Christmassy, it's not festive, just festy. But whole roasted cauliflower, whole roasted pumpkin, a butternut squash. If you've ever seen a butternut squash turducken, that's pretty cool. So you split the butternut squash in half, you scoop out the seeds, and then you stuff it with quinoa, cranberries, whatever it is that you might stuff a turkey with, you stuff that butternut squash with, and you wrap it. You can also do like a layer of wilted spinach in there as well, create those layers. The world is your oyster. And may I just say, oysters are vegan too. So you could still have your oysters on the I know, I just heard an inhale of breath, because it's very contentious. But I'm just waking the people up with questions. That was, yeah. So yes, the world is your oyster. Just think about big roast veg, but also I find myself adding more and more of those Ottolenghi style share plates. Big salads. Think some things that are more cooked that you can do the day before. Only do a few things on the day. The great thing about veg-based dishes is that they last really well in the fridge. You don't have to make them a la minute. So you could have 2 nights ago roast veg in a salad, crumble in some almond feta or straight up feta, and your guests will be none the wiser, and it's still delicious. And you're minimising food waste as well. The other back
Another off the
seat.
back.
Hi, Ros.
We have this constant battle in our household over organic and whether organic is a waste of money. Do you have any views on organic?
Yes, I definitely I have views. I have views on a lot of things. You don't have to accept my views. They're just my views. My view on organic is that a lot of organic food that we buy tastes better. So we're driven by taste, and taste is nutrition. So if something tastes better to us, then that's probably going to be more nutritious to us. That's just the way that we were built. But there are some things that actually take are more intensive to the environment to be grown organically, or to be travelling from Peru. You know, there's, let's say, organic almonds, and you're buying them when almonds aren't in season, and they're Peruvian, and you've shipped them from across the world. So I think local first, organic where possible. And I just try and find out who's growing my stuff. You'll hear a lot of time, you know, the dirty dozen, or certain kind of vegetables are better, fruits and vegetables are better when they're organic versus certain ones that are not. There are some growers that are trying to be organic in principle. It's actually just the accreditation to be organic that's cost prohibitive to them. So if you're living in this area and you've got incredible farmers markets nearby, and you're shopping at, you know, the market as well. There are also community supported agriculture schemes that you can enter into, where you buy, like, you subscribe and you just get a box of whatever it is. So if you're passionate about organics, there are some fantastic growers like Angelica Farm or Mount Franklin Organics that will deliver vegetables to you, to your house, for about the same price as going out to the shops and buying it non-organically. So there are some vegetables that I will tend to buy organic much more often, but if I know that that grower is doing their best and probably not spraying, because spraying is actually quite expensive, and their soil's good and their food tastes good too, then that's where I'm going to go. Does that answer your question, Ros? Nice.
At what point in time, I'm new to meeting you now.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm Joe. At what point in time did you want to more focus on the plant-based? And was there a moment in time that you've gone, all right, this is the direction I want to go? Especially with this book and based on...
A terrific question. So I grew up in Georgia, in the former Soviet Union. So my diet was primarily veg-heavy, just by the nature of living in a place where animal proteins just weren't accessible to us. And my parents did a really great job of cooking those vegetables, so they were always delicious. And I grew up loving vegetables. Coming to Australia, growing up in a predominantly vegetable maligning culture, where they were kind of the butt of jokes, particularly when it came to kids, I realised that there was actually a disconnect, and that I had an opportunity to hopefully share my gift. The moment, the penny drop moment, was when I started working more so in the kids' food literacy space. My background is in teaching. In 2016, I undertook a task funded by the growers of vegetables through Hort Innovation, who look after the growers of vegetables, fruit, seeds and nuts. They tasked me with one question: how do you make vegetables cool for kids? Up till then, I didn't realise how uncool kids thought they were. Less than 5% of kids are getting their recommended daily intake of vegetables a day. And so for the next 3, 4, 5 years now, we started creating programs for kids, to engage them with food through piquing curiosity, through creating podcast episodes, springboard videos for schools, resources for schools as well, all free. And what I realised is that the kids were changing. Kids were more likely to be interested in trying new vegetables, but it was the parents that I needed to support. And so In Praise of Veg for me was really my dissemination of information in a way that I knew parents would be able to accept and families would be able to take on board as well. So it's been a very organic process, and I'm very glad to be here. And I do feel like it's just really exciting to be on the crest of a wave, and on this kind of, I'm watching the paradigm shift, like in an out-of-body kind of experience way. I haven't seen Game Changers, but I watched the trailer today, and I get it. I get it now, why there are all these like big beefy people that 5 years ago would have been paleo that are now thinking, plants, who knew? So now what I hope to do is support those people to continue to eat in a healthful way instead of just thinking, okay, well, if I replace my steak with my fake steak, then I'm eating in a healthful way for me, because that's probably not what really, truly eating plant-forward is.
Did we have any more questions, or do we have time for any more questions?
Excellent. A very, very good question. And because I'm not a nutritionist, I absolutely defer to the internet for that. So what I would say, particularly, for growing kids too, because a lot of kids are going plant-based, and I would say if you have a child at home that's, a teenager particularly, that's gone plant-based and just gone, you know what, I'll just cut out, I'll just stop eating the meat on my plate and I'll just eat the veg, it's really important to support them, whether to bring on a professional or whether just to kind of support them with some resources around how to keep that protein up, especially teenage girls. I was reading some really alarming statistics because teenage girls think that going vegan is going to help them stay skinny or lose weight, which is really unhealthy kind of thinking. So just be mindful of that. If you're hearing this and you're thinking, that rings a bell, then have a think about what's going on there and have a conversation too. So my answer to how do you get enough protein, and actually there was a groan because I'm sure that's something for those of you who are fully plant-based you hear all the time. There is plenty of protein in non-animal sources. So whether that's legumes, whether that's certain vegetables are really high in protein, and some animal protein sources, because they've been reared in such a way where they're pretty nutritionally bereft, they're probably not a great source of protein anyway. So how can we, again, think about the provenance of what we're eating and the kind of overall picture instead of just saying, oh, well, this is just the way it's always been done, so this is the way that we should continue to do it.
Yeah, sure.
Hi Alice, my name's Kim.
Hi, Kim.
I have a quick question for you which actually perfectly leads on from the last one. I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit about your ideas on alternative protein sources and fake meats and those kinds of things. What are your thoughts?
Oh, these are my thoughts. I love that I can just put that caveat and you just have to listen, nod, and then you can just let it go. My thoughts are that if that's the thing that's bridging people from going, because they're nervous, they need a sausage on the plate, so now they've got a fake sausage. Cool. However, turn over the packet and read what's on the back with the ingredients, because the stuff that they stuff these fake meat stuffs with is really bad. It's not great for you. There's a reason why all of these fast food chains are suddenly bringing out vegan alternatives. It's not because they're trying to appeal, not just because they're trying to appeal to a wider market. It's also because it's cheaper for them. And they had fake meat stuffs in there anyway, and now they get to charge more for it. So there are some really great alternative kind of, in terms of like the texture of if you still need to feel like you're eating pulled pork in a bao or whatever it is, there's really cool shredded mushroom kind of, fable food, which you can find at the supermarket, which I think is fantastic. Slather some barbecue sauce on that and it's literally like you're just eating barbecue meat. Really cool stuff. Tempeh, all about it. Think about all of the cultures that are traditionally plant-based cultures. They've been doing this for a really long time, and theirs are the fantastic alternative, textures and alternative to meat things on the plate to give you more interest. That's the place where you should be going, not the kind of synthesized meat-like stuff that people are kind of taking advantage of. But I'm extremely excited to see some of the innovations in that space, in that plant-based space, particularly in the cheese arena.
Why particularly cheese?
Oof. So there's some really great local plant-based cheeses coming out, whether they're cashew-based or coconut-based or almond-based. There's a great, it's not the ABC, so I'll just tell you. Damona is a fantastic local, Martin is his name, and he's just making fantastic cheese. Yay is another brand that out of the Mornington Peninsula, making like a Persian feta out of nuts, I'm pretty sure, a bit of tofu in there as well. The most exciting one to me is a cauliflower-based brie-style cheese that's coming this way. I've been watching it for years from a chef who we exported. We let him go, Sean Quaid, flew to the States. They're raising millions of dollars. It's called Grounded Foods. When it comes to Australia, it is going to blow minds. So that's the sort of stuff that excites me, because I look at the back of their label and I go, okay, so you got some xanthan gum, that's cool. I know what that is. You know, if you don't know what it is, same rules apply. If you don't know what it is, don't put it in your mouth.
Thank you.
That was on camera. Great. That's going to be the grab.
Very passionate about cheese. I love that. Taking notes. Did we have any more questions before we, Kelly's on her way.
Thank you so much for the information tonight. I haven't yet read the book, but I've been plant-based for 3 years now, 100%. And I've found that there's never been an easier time to be plant-based. And I guess I honour all of the veggies that have gone before us for generations that have done it hard when you don't have easily accessible products at the supermarket. And big endorsement for Fable as well, because that shiitake-based meat or protein is awesome, and was recently half price at Woolworths. And I stocked up with about 15 packets.
I did that with Panna coconut vanilla ice cream when that was half price at the shops too. That's my favourite plant-based ice cream. Thank you. We could just share brands now.
My question was, and I guess we're speaking from maybe the bubble that we exist in Fitzroy, in a very green community. And my query is it right to say that the rise of meat consumption in the world is actually going up? And looking at the Asian markets, or particularly China, is your book going to be coming out in China? And how do you evolve different cultures?
A very, very good question. And you're right. It's the aspirational kind of cultures that have looked to America and looked to Australia, have been vegetarian for so long, or primarily veg forward, and now are thinking, okay, well, in order to step into my power, I've got to start eating meat, like I saw, overseas on the TV, on MTV. But again, I think that it's a matter of influencing the sphere that we can and continuing to allow that to grow. If we, as potentially dark green / light green people that are, and I thought about this as I was driving here, certainly, all the way up Punt Road, greener and greener as I drove, and I thought, I'm speaking to the choir. I'm here speaking to the bubble, and it's really easy to look out of the bubble and think, what do we do? How do we break through? Maybe it's all too hard. But it takes me back to another incredible Green speaker, former Senator Bob Brown, who was speaking at a conference in Sydney, Happiness and Its Causes conference, years ago, when his book Optimism came out. And he said that for a long time, people have been treating the planet as though it's a cafe that's doomed to fail. You don't open a cafe expecting it to close. So if we continue to be optimistic, if we continue to ask ourselves, what can I do in my sphere of influence? What am I doing to positively impact and benefit the planet? Then slowly, over time, certainly there will be change. I heard from my foreign rights person that there's interest from Japan down the road. So, over time they might look over and go, what's that pink book? Maybe we need that too. But you're right, I really do think that it's really easy for us in our little bubble to be like, well, why can't they do that? And there's a lot of privilege that we have, that we're afforded in this country, in even having these conversations together. So I'm always trying to check my privilege. I'm always thinking, okay, how can I make this easier and more accessible for people? Which is also partly why I wrote this book, because vegetables are cheaper. So if I want more people to cook, if I give them opportunity to cook with vegetables because they're more accessible, they're more sustainable, and they're actually cheaper for the regular Joe blogs to go and buy. And I don't care if Joe buys an organic potato Just go and buy a potato and go and cook it. You know, that's, I think, the less we can label and the more that we can include everybody in this conversation and not feel hopeless, the more hopeful I remain.
Oh, not sure whether to ask you. Sophie?
Yeah, I've got a question if I'm allowed. It's just continuing on from the last one. I think a lot of us probably are like quite sold on the message, but I imagine, you know, outside of our Fitzroy plant-based eating community, maybe we've got other people in our lives that aren't so plant-based in their eating.
Yeah,
have you got kind of a number one recipe to encourage those people to like come over to the bright
plant side? Okay. Well, I think the number one thing that I would say is don't go into it thinking that you're going to change somebody's mind, because already that sets you up to fail. Because people can sense when you're trying to change their minds. And the further away that your opinions are, studies have shown, the less likely they are to come to the bright side. So my suggestion goes back again to sharing. It means that on the table you might still have an option for them, but you've got more options for you that are delicious. Lead with taste. Don't sit on your high horse and say, well, you know, think about the animals, think about blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Lead with taste and say, hey, this is really delicious. And actually, you know, lead with the hip pocket as well, again. And did you know that this cost me, you know, this Christmas lunch cost me a quarter of what it would have if I had to go and stand in the line at Claringbolds for, you know, my prawns this year or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Yep. Levers. Everybody's got one.
See if you like it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and don't even say that, because that's coercive. Don't be like, taste this, see if you like it.
I need to practice.
No, practice. And
Before I go home.
Because we're all like, it doesn't, this is the advice that I give parents with kids, is as soon as you even say, what do you think of this? You know, you'll like it. It's really good for you. All that, no leading questions, no leading statements, just put it out there. They see you enjoying it, you've put the effort in and it tastes good. That's great. And guess what? We're all kids. Inside each and every one of us is that child that's sitting at the table, triggered by memories of people telling them what to eat and what they should and shouldn't like. So the less we say and the more we serve it up and share, the more likely that our people will come to us.
One more question?
Take a couple more at the end.
Awesome. Okay, great. Over to good. I have questions. My turn. Okay, so we've, as I said before,
that was so generous of you. Normally we have to wait till the end. That was. Can we have a round of applause for Eliza? I've never seen that done. I reckon I'm going to steal that. That's really good.
I think we need to thank the sustainability team, but happy
thank
to
you.
support.
Oh, yes, and thank you, sustainability team. Yes, because it's in the run sheet. Okay, yes, thank you to the sustainability sheet, the people, yes, for putting this on. Isn't it fabulous? But it's a lot of trust as well that you place in the audience that they're going to ask good questions, and they were very good questions, so thank you.
Very good questions, yeah. So I wanted to talk about, we've been talking again a lot about the reducing the environmental impacts of food, and we know that it's related, it's not just about reducing meat intake, but many things you've already talked about tonight, things like reducing wastage, supporting local farmers who use sustainable practices, like you said, local food and seasonal, which is a huge one, I think. But what I really want to hear about is you say that you're a leftover lover.
Oh, yeah.
And I too am a leftover lover. And I would love to hear, you know, your hot tips, like with leftovers, because I'm a big one on doing massive soups. Yes, like for so many people, not even know that many people, just massive soups and then kind of remaking them. What do you call it? You call it a double duty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can you talk to us about the double duty of leftovers?
Yes, that was another pitch for a book that the publisher said sounds good, but also sounds like maybe it's about washing up, which is not a book I would write. I think that was like just testing the level of knowledge that my audience have. I don't do the washing up ever, so that's something that I'm trying to continue to normalise. So your question about leftovers. I don't think of leftovers as something that should be seen as a less than. Because if you ever go to a restaurant and eat a restaurant's food, chances are you're eating leftovers.
Yes, I read that.
Yes.
My goodness, I thought, oh my God, absolutely.
They've been prepping sometimes for days and then they just reheat it to order. How is that different from what you do in your house? So when I think about what I'm cooking, I'm always cooking double because then half of that becomes the next night's meal. And whether I put that into, let's say it's sweet potato, I've got half a sweet potato left, roasted, and I blitz that up and turn that into a puree that goes with whatever. From the night before that was a jacket sweet potato filled to the brim with sweet corn and chives, and it could be tofudi, it could be creme fraiche, whatever floats your boat. Always I'm thinking of those things. So definitely soup. I've always got vegetable soup in the fridge. It's almost always borscht. My mum is sick of making it every week. She says to me, Alice, what soup do you want me to make? I always say borscht, and it's not just for me. Our 2-year-old froths on borscht. She eats multiple bowls a day, and it just means that it takes away the pressure of like, is she getting her 5 a day? Like, not that there was ever any doubt, but especially on days where we're pressed, because I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination in the way that I eat. And if I'm on a deadline or if we're running around all day and we get to dinner and it's like, what are we going to eat? If we've got that borscht there, at the very least I know that we've got some nutrition going into us so that then we've got some brain power to think about what the next thing's going to be. So, soup, yes. Always having like maybe some broth in the freezer, in containers that you can defrost. There are some fantastic plant-based broths that you could be making, whether you're going the kombu option, so a little bit seaweedy, shiitake. I can't tell you how great shiitake is for building umami, which is the thing that a lot of meat eaters miss when they go plant-based. So whether that is shiitake mushrooms, which you can buy dried and rehydrate them and use them in broths, or you can buy them fresh. We're so lucky there are more and more people growing mushrooms. So buy fresh shiitake, crisp it up a little bit in the pan to really bring out the caramelised, umami bomb notes of that mushroom. And whether that then becomes pasta or if that becomes, into the broth. I'm jumping around so much, but these are ingredients that are always in my fridge. Mm-hmm. If you are super time poor, one thing that you can do for yourself is batch saute onions. If you know that you've got like 20 minutes to get dinner on the table, sauteing onions is 10 minutes of that time. So you can either batch saute onions for like 3 or 4 days and just have that sitting, especially because olive oil, right? Yeah, layer of fat in the fridge, in a container. Or you could chop up that onion, pop it in the pan with the olive oil. As soon as it sizzles, turn the heat down a little bit, close the lid, and you can keep prepping whatever it is and not have to worry about the onions. But that's like something definitely you can do. Another ingredient, food stuff that people waste more than any other food stuff, is bread. So if you've got half a loaf of bread in your pantry that's feeling like a brick,
yes,
this was worth you coming out tonight. Lean in. Wet it. Under the sink tap, just wet it. Top and bottom. Put it in the oven, cold oven. Turn it up to like 160. And before the oven even comes to temperature, the bread is fresh. The bread is like a freshly baked loaf of bread to the point. I know.
We have disbelievers.
You're welcome. Thank you. To the point where the crack on the crust is like.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah.
The inside doughy bit is like you've literally just brought it back from a French boulangerie. And it's one of my greatest joys. I forget bread on purpose, just so I can do that. There is only so much breadcrumb that you can make for yourself. So please, next time, don't worry about your brick bread. Do the thing. I need a good name for it. I'm really glad I'm testing my audience, and I feel like I'm doing a thing for Sustainability Vic in May around saving bread, and I suggested an ASMR video. So like sound, deep and intense sound of this brick bread. Good, right? Brick bread in the oven, comes out. I think this is going to change people's lives. That is, to me, not a leftover. That is like, doing more than its duty in terms of ingredients.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Is that a lot? Have I given you some tips? I feel like that's like triple a tip. So that's a lot. If you've got more tips that you need, always, I can see many familiar faces in the audience that have slid into my DMs and asked me what to do with a thing that's looking a little bit lank. My inbox is always open. So please help me help you.
I think bread is groundbreaking. Thank you. Yeah. And I can imagine you doing that clip as well.
Can't wait. Chips. Chips is the other thing that people waste. My good friend Diane McGrath, who is a biohacker / astronaut candidate.
Wow.
Yes, she did a whole week as a freegan where she just sat at cafes and waited till people left and ate their food. It was for research. But people do that, and that's totally, as long as you're being hygienic. This is before COVID. Gosh, now you can't even sneeze. But the number one thing that people waste beyond bread when they're out is chips. So do ask for your chips takeaway and do reheat them, whether it's just in a pan with some oil or even in the oven, because you're almost air frying. If you think about it, because they're already coated in multiple layers of fat. So if you're popping them in the oven, again, cold oven to reheat leftovers means that the outside, the outside cooks before the inside explodes. So the inside cooks before the outside explodes. That's probably much more logical.
Okay, I have one more question.
Okay, good.
Okay, ready? So we know that plant-based cooking in some circles has a bit of a bad name for itself. One thing that comes to mind is kind of thinking it's bland, etc. So every time we have these talks, we love a top 3 tips. And I know you've given a lot of tips already, but...
Chip tips.
To start with, when you say plant forward, so starting with the vegetable at the centre of our meals, top 3 tips, something we can do this week, maybe tonight, depending on how people feel or how hungry we are after the talk, so that we can put into practice. Yeah.
Number 1 tip, so you're starting with the veg already, think of veg like you would meat. So the sort of stuff that meat really benefits from, caramelising the outside, then slow roasting it. The same goes for something like half a butternut squash. Caramelising the face and then slow roasting it until it yields into this kind of custardy, buttery texture on the inside. That's what you would do with, say, like a lamb leg or something, exactly the same. Preheat your tray as you're preheating the oven. And then you don't have to caramelise it in a pan before you put it in the oven. You just put it face down, psh, boom. Next tip, now that you've got your butternut squash half, think about texture. So whether that be fresh textures like garnishing with fresh herbs, grow them if you can. It's so exorbitantly expensive to continue buying the herbs. If you are buying herbs, the best way to store them is damp paper towel or damp kitchen towel. That's the way they store it in restaurants. If you know that you're going to use the coriander 2 days in a row, pick it all. Then store the picked leaves in some damp paper towel in a container in the fridge. It'll still be good tomorrow, and you've just saved yourself 5 minutes of picking and washing and all of those things. I spin my herbs the same way that I spin my lettuce leaves in the salad spinner. Very, very easy, gets all the moisture out. The more dry your leaves, the more that they will take to dressings. When you dress just before serving. One thing that people complain about with salads, particularly leafy salads, is that they're soggy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Avoid the sog. Dress just before you serve. If you're bringing a plate with a leafy salad of some description, dressing in a jar. Dress it a la minute. People will think you're very fancy. Nuts. Nuts are your friends. Whether you toast them first or you can use plenty of nuts without doing that at all. If you're worried about burning those nuts, preheat a pan, put the nuts in, turn the pan off. Give it a shake every now and then. It's hot enough to toast the nuts, not hot enough to burn the nuts. And on the topic of nuts, I know this is a 4th tip. Oh, yes.
I was just saying, that's fantastic.
It is.
I always burn the nuts.
I know this because I always burn the nuts. So, a lot of these solutions that I found is because I cook like this. I am sick of throwing out burnt pine nuts. So that's how I came to discovering the hot pan, turn it off method. Needs a better name. Accepting offers now, please. Final tip. If you are going plant-based, the thing that your body will miss most is fat. So think about non-animal based fat inclusions like nuts, especially rich nuts like macadamias and almonds and cashews, coconut cream. That is what is going to build the satiety in your self, in your personage. And satiety is that feeling of satisfaction that you get when you've eaten enough. So fat is the missing link. Often when olive oil's great, it's awesome, but just think about other kind of fat sources, and they don't have to be fake, to foodie style things. They can just be as nature provided. Nuts, shredded coconut cream, olive oil, go heavy.
Very generous. 4 tips. That's 4 tips to take home that we can all do this week. I know I'll be doing a lot of them.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the last question I have. Did we want to kick it back to questions? Did anyone have any questions?
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
How wet does the bread have to be? Yeah.
And how much water do we use?
Not that wet. It really, just... Stand by for ASMR video, you'll see. It's really, like some people, if they really want to be sticklers, you can just have like a spray bottle of water. If you know that you are a bread forgetter, you might need a bread forgetting spray bottle, just so you know. But just honestly, under the tap, you can use filtered water. I know I'm in Fitzroy, it's fine. But also tap water's great. So yes, in the oven. You can't wet it too much. It just is going to take you longer to evaporate out all the moisture. So it's more, it's more is more, but just depends how much time you have. Thank you for your question. I'm sure that you weren't the only one wondering.
I was thinking it. Yeah. I was going to ask.
My question was a little bit more towards growing food, but I just wanted your thoughts on mustard greens and coloured potatoes.
Okay, so mustard greens, and what was the second one?
Coloured potatoes.
Coloured potatoes. Okay, so my thoughts as an eater of mustard greens, delicious. As a grower, sadly, I just have such a brown thumb. But I think the key with mustard greens is when you pick them small, they're sweeter. So the bigger they get, the more intense, right? The mustardiness of them. But that can be really fantastic. If you know that you've got people coming around that can't take a hot green, shred it. So then it's like a textural explosion. Coloured potatoes are overrated. There's so many potatoes. If you're going to go a purple Congo plus, a purple Congo potato salad, it's not going to be very tasty. I'm just making sure the book can't hear me. It's purple Congo potatoes are really starchy, and I just think that there's a lot to be said for a chat, just a really classic chat. So that's why there's a potato salad in here where I combine the two. Are you growing coloured potatoes? That is so cool. You are extremely cool. Yes, exactly. Looks so great. And growing your own potatoes, actually, how cool. One thing, growing your own is amazing if you can do it. That was the amazing asterisk if you can do it. My in-laws grow fantastic things. They've got a hobby farm in South Gippsland. One of the things that they have recently started growing are potatoes. I remember picking my first potato out of the ground and the feeling, the cold earth that you feel in your palm. It's like you are connecting elementally with nature. Even if they're coloured potatoes and you know they're not going to taste very good, just mix them with other potatoes that taste better. In Peru, there's a potato museum. There are so many potato varieties that we never get to see because people do vote with their taste buds. So that we do breed for sweeter potatoes. Yes.
Hi, Alice. My name's Christina.
Hi, Christina.
I'm wondering, you were talking about producing the kids' resources before you had your bub. What's it been like raising your daughter? Have you had any aha moments?
Oh, what a great question. I'm so glad.
I mean, with food.
Yes,
But-
thank you. Settle in. Labour. No, yes, I'm so glad that you asked, because I remember when I was creating, when I was a teacher versus when I was creating Phenomenon versus now as a mother, I've had aha moments multiple times, because when I was teaching, I was just like, well, why can't they? And even when I was creating Phenomenon, well, it's parents and teachers, they need to do it. I am so much more empathetic now of the struggle. The struggle is real. I see you, I hear you, we're in this together. It's totally normal, it's a phase. Thankfully, this is one thing that I was so afraid of. I would wake up in a cold sweat in the last trimester, not only because it was really uncomfortable, but also because I was worried. And I said to my husband Nick one day, what if she doesn't like food? That was my biggest fear. And he said, well, we'll work through it, it's fine. I'm pretty sure if anyone knows how to work through it, I'm pretty sure we've got the resources now. But what I've come to realise is that our children value what they see us value, and they come and connect with us over what they can see connects them to us. So there's a level of non-attachment that I've had to actively practice, particularly as she was learning, and it's a continual process. We're always learning to eat, right? Things like, at the moment she's 2, so from a palate forming perspective, herbs are challenging for her because they stick to the roof of her mouth. Fair enough. So I've had to really empathetically watch her, very kind of with one eye, pretending that I'm not attached, just to be ready for her to spit it out. And that's cool, that's fine. I'm honouring her journey with every fibre of my being, because it is the biggest gift that I know that I can give her, to love food the way that we love food. And gosh, I know that not every kid is the same, and I know that she very easily could have been just by nature a fussier kid. But we're doing everything that we can, which means setting aside the time to sit with her at the table and eat. It means being very non-attached when she was in her baby-led weaning, mess on the floor phase. It was very much a phase. If you watch, and Hazel had her Instagram account, where you just see her hands and the top of her head and just hear the snuffling. She eats with a fork and spoon now. Her dexterity is out of control. She's learning to eat with chopsticks. She's impressive to the point where people come out of kitchens to watch. We take her to restaurants on a regular basis, again, to make her feel like she's got the language to speak when she's there and she understands the etiquette, and that's because that's what we prioritise. And I know how privileged we are to have the time, to have the access, to have the inclination and the knowledge to do all of that stuff. I'm just really glad that questions like this come up and that I can kind of share my experience and tell you that, there is hope for every kid, and whether that happens, thankfully she likes food, but, I've met plenty of parents whose kids at this age have not liked food, and because they've approached it through the division of responsibility, which is that parents provide, children decide. That's a good one. Marilyn, why are you laughing? In my day, is that what you were about to say? Back in the day was very bad. Back in the day is the reason why we have scar tissue on our souls around what it means for kids to learn to eat, particularly around vegetables. Back in the day, not honouring children's own true feelings, right? I was there. We were all there. And I think part of this work, part of why I wrote this book, is because I want to tell everybody that it's okay, wherever you are, you can learn to love veg. And that nobody should tell you just eat it because it's good for you, because that never works. And in fact, that takes us back further. So I think a lot of the work that I'm doing is actually talking to people's inner child, myself included.
One more question? Yes? Yes.
Hi, Justine. Thank you for your work. Yes. Yeah. What year are you teaching? Okay, cool. So I was teaching middle school. So, yep, and a lot of my work, I was a homeroom teacher for year 7, year 8 girls. Spent a lot of time with that age group. And I'm going to try and make this relevant to the full audience, not just PE teachers and fellow teaching enthusiasts. So what I will say is that kind of veganism as an excuse for orthorexia is something that you see and you have the power to really impact. But we just need to tread really gently, gently. Potentially, you can, if you can't beat them, join them. Bring one of these influencers in for a talk with the girls. I know quite a few of them go to schools and talk about it, because you only see the highlights reel, right, on the Instagram, and you only the reason why plant-based diets are so popular on Instagram is because they look really good. There's so much colour, there's nutrition bowls and all of those things, but the way that gets translated to a teenager, a preteen teenager, there's no nuance to that. It's black and white to them. And so if I had to concisely say what to do, I would say check out phenomenon.com.au, get all of the teachers on board rather than just trying to do this in the short space of time that you have to teach nutrition, because nutrition is just one aspect of teaching kids about food. And I think part of what's happening is that they're only seeing food as fuel, and they're potentially seeing the conversation around being plant-based or vegan as something that kind of makes them cool because they can join the other girls that are also having those conversations. So if we can kind of pique their curiosity around food and encourage them to see it as like a multi-prismatic kind of thing, and then maybe they go, oh, I didn't realise that broccoli was really interesting, and actually I kind of like it, and I can use broccoli instead of cauliflower as a rice alternative, and hey, I've got green stuff on my plate now. Does that answer your question? Please check out Phenomenon, DM me, we can work through this together. I totally see it. It's really frustrating. And I think influencers have a lot of responsibility in the way that they communicate what it is that they're eating and how it is that they can be nutritionally sound in the advice that they're giving. But that's on camera too. But there are some really good ones too. So maybe it's a matter of like recommending certain people that are being responsible in the way that they communicate it, not just like Smoothie Bowl Central. One more question, I saw it, I'll be really quick.
This year, hi, I identify as neurodiverse. So this year I've decided, after last year being such a challenging year, to try below the menu. Like, I just don't understand this, the whole choosing it, seeing a menu, and trying everything out. I'm I'm always above that. And what was my question? Just to be aware that some people like myself can be very sensitive to fussy eating. That's right. Yes. We're not fussy eaters. We're just very sensitive eaters, I guess.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And I think sensitive people having texture. For neurodiverse people, texture is very challenging. And people have lots of dietary needs. There's a lot of fear around food. Food can make a lot of people uncomfortable, not just sort of spiritually, but physically uncomfortable. So I try and be as inclusive as possible in that conversation. I find what's happening is that more and more people are becoming aware and trying to be sensitive, but it goes back to that conversation we were having before about kids. So you don't know if that child is being fussy because they're going through a period of neophobia, which is very normal, peaks around sort of 18 months to 3 years, where they're just nervous about new foods because in the wild, that's what protected them from eating a weird berry and being poisoned. So that just hasn't gone away. So that's what parents need to kind of be aware of. If their child's spitting something out, it's because they're not familiar with that texture. But by the same token, there are a very small number of people who might have ARFID, which is really, yes, so which is like extremely sensitive. I've forgotten what the acronym stands for, but if the child gets to 3 and it's still extremely uncomfortable, then if you feel like you need a professional's opinion, get that professional's opinion. It shouldn't feel like every meal is a battle, because the child is just as frustrated as you are. But I think particularly what I'm really excited about in the world of parenting is that idea of honouring a child's agency, hearing and seeing a child, which is something that we didn't see in generations past. And so if I see you and I hear you and I empathise with your experience, because I was there when I was 2 or 3. If we tap into our inner child and say, oh, wow, yeah, that is new. I'm giving you a broccoli floret for the first time and those little birdies on the top are getting stuck, in the roof of your mouth. Maybe next time I chop those off just for now. Think about chopping it in different ways. It doesn't have to be little stars and moons and things, but just literally smaller bites or different texture. Explore, maybe they might like a mushy broccoli. All of those kind of things. Turn it into a bit of a game, but also a team effort rather than an us and them. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. We'll leave the questions there, unfortunately, for tonight, but please do stick around after the talk. First, can we give a huge round of applause to Alice?